Have you ever played a game like Roblox, Minecraft, Apex Legends, I don't know, whatever people play these days, and just wondered, like, I wonder how this is scripted? This could be done with anything, even if you aren't the game developer, right? Maybe you just look at a feature and you just wonder, like, I wonder how they actually scripted this. I wonder how they actually developed and made this work. Well, in this video, I'm gonna go over what Roblox players are composed of via script. So, because I'm a very cool and amazing person, I have hacked the Roblox headquarters and I've gained access to this secret software, which basically gives me insight on how Roblox games are made. Now, the very first thing that you should know is the difference between players and characters. Because this is something I see mixed up quite often, okay? So a player is inside of players. I know, shocking news. And opening up the player reveals all of these things, which we will talk about in detail, right? But all you need to know is that this effectively is like the player's account, right? This isn't the character that we see here, it's just the player data, okay? But then this player, it's linked to a character, okay? Which is inside the workspace. Because in case you don't do Roblox, or in case you're like a completely brand new developer, anything that you see in the game has to be inside of the workspace, okay? So this, the original lamp, that's me, that's my physical character, okay? That's the difference. This isn't the player, this is just the character, which is controlled by the player, right? In a way, you can think of it as like a soul possessing the body, right? The player is the soul, and then the character is the body. The reason I want you to know this, well, if you're a Roblox developer, this is just like essential, right? But in case you aren't, the things that I'll cover in this video will often refer to, player, character, and I'll be using those words. So I just thought it'd be helpful for you to know. So the very first thing to cover is the backpack, okay? Now the backpack is honestly incredibly simple. If you've ever played Roblox, hopefully you know what a tool is. You know how you play those, like, I don't know, superpower anime fighting games or whatever. Maybe not you, right? Maybe you aren't that stupid, okay? But maybe you play those games, and you know how they have like tools. Like you can walk over some like item and then you could like pick it up or whatever, and it gets added into your inventory. The backpack is where that item goes, right? Via script. So for example, if I were to add a tool inside of the backpack, there we go. So now, because it's inside of my backpack, it's inside of my inventory. So now, because it's inside of my backpack, it's also inside of my in-game inventory. Now, I can equip it, and obviously, because like I didn't actually make it a physical model, it doesn't show anything. But you might have noticed that the moment I equip it, it leaves the backpack. And the reason it leaves the backpack is because, like I said, anything that actually exists in the 3D world goes into the workspace, right? So like I said, the tool doesn't have a 3D object, but if it did, well then we would want to show the tool, right? And so it just goes inside of the player's character, right? And then the moment I unequip the tool, it leaves the player character and it goes back to the player's backpack. And something to note about the backpack is that you might be wondering right now, like, oh, but how do players actually get the tools, right? Like, do I have to keep on adding them inside of a script? Not really, okay? So there's an item inside of, the Explorer window called Starter Pack. And basically, any tool that you add inside of Starter Pack, so for example, I don't know, sword or whatever, right? Any tool inside of here will then get cloned to the backpack of any player who joins. So if I join the game right now, I will get this sword item, right? Very simple. So anything inside the starter pack gets cloned into your backpack, okay? And this is where we actually get onto the second item, being the starter gear. All you have to know, this one was a weird one because I actually looked into it and I couldn't actually get any proper results until I tested it myself. So this might have been even confusing to you as a beginner developer. The starter gear is literally the starter pack, but just for your player, okay? So what do I mean by this, right? Starter pack, it has tools inside of it and it gives them to everyone, okay? So for example, right, imagine a girl who sends Snapchats to every guy she meets, right? That's what a starter pack effectively does, right? Any player who actually joins the game, their backpack gets populated with whatever is inside of the starter pack, right? And whenever they reset as well. So if I were to reset my character right now, what would happen is that the backpack would quickly clear, right? We don't see it because Roblox handles it, but the backpack quickly clears itself and then repopulates itself with whatever is in the starter pack and what's inside of the player's starter gear. The difference is that this starter gear will only give items to its player. So it's not going to give items to other players, just this player. So for example, let's say that, whenever a player joins the game, you want him to have a sword, right? That makes sense, right? You want him to have a sword. But then also, what if the player purchases an item? So let's say there's an item for like 1,000 coins and the player purchases that. Well, now you want them to also keep on respawning with that new item. So what you would do is that whenever a player purchases that item, you put it inside of their starter gear. So now they will respawn with whatever is inside of starter pack plus whatever is inside of their starter gear, okay? So the starter gear only affects the player it's inside of, right? It's not going to affect any other players, just the player it's inside of. And so that is basically starter gear, right? It's just starter pack, but for the individual player. And actually keep that in mind because player GUI and player script are effectively the same, okay? And before we move on to player GUI as well, starter gear needs you to actually like add items inside of it via script, right? So like me putting an item inside of starter pack won't move it to starter gear, right? It's going to move it inside the backpack, but not the starter gear. So starter gear is empty by default. You need to actually put stuff inside of it. Like you need to put the tools that you need the player to have inside of it. So now the next thing is player GUI, okay? And so it has a built-in GUI called FreeCam. I'm not too sure what this does. I assume controls the camera. The idea with the player GUI is that it holds the player's user interface. Very simple. In case you don't know what user interface is, let me just add one real quick. It's just stuff like buttons, right? Like so. So we can add a button, right? You can add something like an image, right? That's effectively it. User interface is just 2D stuff on the screen, right? It's like inventory, menus, button, whatever. You get the gist, right? That's the idea. The player GUI, effectively any GUI that's inside of here will be shown to the corresponding player, right? The way GUI typically is added is, again, you could add it via a script into the player GUI, or, you know, you could just put GUI inside of starter GUI. So I could do this. I could just say, yeah, text. And here I can modify the GUI a bit more. I can drag it around. And then anything that's inside of the starter GUI, right? So if I play the game right now, it'll get cloned over to any player who joins, right? So if I open up my player GUI, we have the free cam, and we have the GUI that I just created inside of starter GUI. I know I'm like using the word GUI a lot. It's confusing to me as well, right? Point is, any user interface here will get cloned over to the player, right? And also note that if you want to change a specific player's user interface, you need to make sure that you're changing it in the player GUI, right? Because for example, let's say if I wanted to delete this button, what I've seen people do is they go to starter GUI and then they delete it, which isn't going to work because it's inside of the player GUI, right? So to affect the player, you need to affect their player GUI. So remove it inside of their player GUI like so, and then it's gone. Very simple. And the next item on the list before I cover something very interesting about all three of these is player script, okay? And just like starter gear, just like player GUI, player script is basically attached to an item and it's called starter player, or specifically starter player script, okay? So there's also a starter character script, which like I said before, whenever a character joins the game, any scripts that are inside of here will get added inside of that character, right? But then any script inside of starter player will be added inside of player scripts, okay? So basically just if you want to, have a script inside of the player that does something, a local script, right? Because it affects the player, you can do that, right? So these come in by default, right? So Roblox comes pre-built with these scripts. So we have a scripts loader, you have sounds, you have a ton of these, like a lot. Like that is crazy. Look at that. VR navigation, that is crazy. Someone had to script all of these. That huge respect for the Roblox team for making this seemingly stupid character actually insanely advanced. And yeah, like I said, right? I probably don't have to show you. You probably understand. Just if I add a script inside of this and then play the game, the script will go into player script and it's gonna, run and then do whatever we want. And so now, as promised, I'm going to actually cover a very interesting fact that I've noticed between all three of these, right? Now, if you aren't a Roblox developer, you probably haven't really noticed this or picked up on this, but if you are a Roblox developer, you may have noticed that all three of these have the same, I don't know, what is it called? Like square, diamond, rhombus icon, whatever. All three of these have the same icon, right? Usually that never happens because all items have their own unique icons, right? All of them, look at this. All of these items have their own unique icons, but then these three seem to have their own icons. Another thing is that we need to identify what type these things are. And when I say type, I mean that every single item in Roblox is considered a data type. So for example, workspace is a type of workspace. And it's also called a workspace, right? But if I let's say I wanted to call it something, like for example, we have the base plate, which is a part, right? So this is a part named base plate. We have the original lamp, which is a model, okay? We have the terrain, which is the terrain. I could rename workspace to anything I want. I could rename this to 1, 2, 3, but it's still the workspace. It's just called differently, right? So that's basically the idea of data types, okay? And so when we click on these things, this is a starter gear, this is a player GUI, and this is a player script. So all three of these are actually different items that have the same icon. Now, I'm not stupid. Like, I've seen this icon before. I know what it is. Effectively, it's just for items that don't really like get used often. Like they only get used in one scenario, right? Which is here. So for these items, you could think of it as like a placeholder, right? And then you might ask like, oh, why does backpack have its own icon? And to that, I have no clue. And so a quick thing that I actually found really interesting, okay? If let's say I were to run a script, which I'm not going to, right? Something like instance.new, which what it does is it basically asks you for the data type and it creates a brand new item of that type, right? So I can make a new part, right? I can make a new player, or like I can't make a new player because I don't have the privileges, right? And that also wouldn't work because the player would need someone controlling it. But you know what I mean, right? Basically any type of item, terrain, right? Basically any type of item can be added. Workspace can be added, I think. Okay, no, workspace cannot be added. Basically any type of item can be added, right? Remote event, script, right? I could add a script. I could add a local script, localization table, whatever, right? So then what if we try it out with these, right? And so here's something that I've noticed that's really interesting. If I put starter gear, it actually works. So it actually lets me. And if I, let's say, parent it to the workspace, and I do it like this. If I look in the workspace, it adds a starter gear item. That's pretty cool, right? However, if I type in player GUI, it doesn't let me. Right, so if I try adding player GUI, there's no type of player GUI. If I try and add player script, it doesn't let me. Right, there's no type of player script. As you can see, it doesn't autofill, and if it doesn't autofill, it means that it doesn't exist. Right, so that's kind of interesting. Okay, right. However, the weirdest thing, which is confusing me even still right now, is there's another command which basically gets access to all data types, and it's called isA. So this is used to check whether something is a certain data type. Like if baseplate is a part, then we can do something. That's the idea, right? So I could do like, I don't know, workspace.baseplate is a, right? So this will return true or false, whether it is something. So I could check if it's a part, I could check if it's a player, blah, blah, blah. And here's the fun part. I could check if it's a starter gear, right? So I could do that. And I could check if it's a player GUI. And I can also check if it's a player script, right? I could check if it's a workspace. I could check if it's I think a game as well. No, I can't. Okay, I can't check game. But yeah, so it is really interesting how it doesn't let us add player GUI and player script, but it lets us check if this is a player GUI or a player script. I don't know. I just found that really interesting how it just lets us do that, but not add our own, versions of them. And the last thing I'll do is we need to actually cover the player itself, right? Because, we covered all of these items, but it's like, what does the player actually have to offer? Because if I click on the player right now, we actually get a lot of these properties, right? Now, I'll be honest, I won't cover most of these because I really don't know much. We have like stuff controls. We have, the player's like team, that shows up on the leaderboard. We have the player's camera, right? So we actually can check like camera max zoom, right? So for example, right now the max zoom is this, but I could set it to be like 1,000. And now I can actually zoom out however far I want, right? So you can edit this, and that actually, that's pretty cool, right? Or I could set max zoom to like 10. And then, yeah, I can't zoom out any further than 10, which, if that's what you want, go ahead. But the two biggest properties of players, which you should take note of, are character, right? So this is the character that the player is inhabiting right now, right? So you can change the player's characters. You can say, player.character, and then you could give it like the model of whatever new character you want it to inhabit. So if you need to access a player's character, this is how you do it. You say player.character, right? And then that gives you the character, and then from there you can do whatever you want with the character. And the second property, which is very important, is the player's user ID. This is a unique number that's attached to every single account, okay? This is basically a unique string of numbers that is attached to every single account, right? So if your game has like a system where you want to make sure that every player has like an individual spot in like a leaderboard or whatever, what people used to do is they used to use usernames, because you can't make a username that someone else has, right? But now like you can, because like, Roblox just added like display names or something. And the issue with display names is that they aren't unique. So you can have the same display name as someone else. So names are no longer an option, right? The only thing that is unique to the player is their user ID. So if you're trying to, save the player's data or something like that, always use their user ID. And yeah, so if you're a player, hopefully this was interesting. Hopefully you've gained a greater understanding and appreciation for this little, Roblox character that you have. If you're a developer who, found this interesting, but also just kind of enjoyed the way that I've been teaching so far, then in the description, and I'm not even plugging this, by the way, like I have a course, right? Which it's like 6 hours, it's paid, right? but a good amount of the course is actually free to watch. Like I specifically went onto the settings and I made sure that, like certain videos are like free to watch for people who don't, want to spend money on courses. So if that sounds cool, then like I said, click the link in the description. And we are back to basics. Thank you for watching.